Most people never notice the moment they hand their mind over to someone else. It rarely looks dramatic. No chains, no commands, no obvious force. It happens in quieter ways. In the pause after someone disapproves of you. In the sting of being ignored. In the rush of explaining yourself when no explanation was needed. In the subtle panic that rises when someone withdraws affection, questions your worth, or makes you feel guilty for choosing what is right for you. And because these moments feel small, they are often dismissed. But this is exactly where manipulation begins, not with domination, but with emotional leverage. A look, a tone, a delayed reply, a little praise offered at the right time, a little rejection delivered at the wrong one. Before long, your mood changes because of someone else's expression. Your confidence bends because of someone else's opinion. Your peace depends on forces outside you, and the moment that happens, you are no longer fully free. This is the weakness most people carry without seeing it. They believe they are rational, independent, self-directed. Yet much of their behavior is quietly shaped by the fear of judgment, the hunger for approval, and the discomfort of conflict. They do not choose many of their reactions. Their reactions are chosen for them. The Stoics saw this with brutal clarity. They understood that the most dangerous prison is the one that feels like ordinary life. Epictetus taught that some things are within our control and some are not. It sounds simple at first, almost too simple, but the more honestly you look at your life, the more you realize how often suffering begins by confusing the two. Your choices, your judgments, your values, your responses, these belong to you. But the opinions of others, their moods, their approval, their insults, their attempts to provoke you, these do not. And yet most people live as if the opposite were true. They neglect the one territory they actually govern while obsessing over the territory they never could. This is why manipulation works. It works when someone can reach inside you through something external. It works when your self-worth can be inflated by praise or punctured by criticism. It works when your inner weather changes every time the outside climate shifts. It works when you fear rejection more than you value truth. It works when you would rather be accepted than be free. So the Stoic rule that makes you dangerous to manipulate is this: never allow external people or events to dictate your internal state. Not because feelings are bad, not because detachment means becoming cold, and not because strength means pretending nothing affects you. That is not Stoicism. Stoicism is not emotional numbness. It is emotional ownership. It is the discipline of saying, what enters my mind may not be my choice, but what rules my mind will be. That is what makes a person difficult to control. When your peace cannot be bought with praise or stolen by insult, you become steady in a world built on reaction. When your confidence is rooted in character instead of approval, flattery loses its power over you. When discomfort no longer frightens you, guilt and pressure no longer move you so easily. You do not become dangerous in a violent sense. You become dangerous to manipulation because you are no longer available for emotional capture. And the first place this freedom begins is in the need to be liked. This need is so common that most people confuse it with kindness. They think adapting themselves to gain acceptance is maturity. They think softening their convictions to avoid disapproval is diplomacy. They think constantly reading the room, adjusting their voice, their opinions, even their personality is just part of getting along. But somewhere in that performance, the self begins to disappear. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself again and again not to value the noise of the crowd above the verdict of his own reason. That lesson is still painfully relevant now. Think about how often people betray their own judgment because they want to belong. They laugh at what they do not find funny. They agree with what they do not believe. They stay silent when they should speak. They build a version of themselves that earns applause but feels strangely hollow to live inside. The manipulator loves this hunger for approval because anyone who needs validation can be guided by it. Praise becomes a leash, inclusion becomes a bargaining chip. And the cure is not arrogance, it is self-sufficiency of judgment. It is learning to ask, do I respect my own reasons, before asking, will they approve? Because once your standard moves inward, social pressure begins to lose its grip. And that leads to another weakness manipulators depend on: speed. They need you to react before you reflect. An insult is thrown, and they want immediate anger. A guilt-laced message arrives, and they want immediate compliance. A criticism appears online, and they want immediate defensiveness. The faster your reaction, the less likely it is to be yours. It will belong to your wound, your fear, your pride, or your conditioning. Stoicism places enormous value on the pause. That small space between what happens and what you do next is where freedom lives. Most people lose their power in that space because they never use it. They treat emotion like a command. They feel it, and then they obey it. But an emotion is not an order. It is a signal. Sometimes useful, sometimes distorted, always worth examining. Imagine someone provoking you in conversation, hoping to pull you into their chaos. The ordinary instinct is to strike back, to prove a point, to defend your image. But the Stoic response begins elsewhere. It begins with restraint, a breath, a moment of silence, a refusal to let another person choose the tempo of your mind. And in that pause, something changes. You stop being a target because you stop being a...
This matters even more when the mind starts doing something else it does almost constantly: inventing intentions. A short message arrives, no warmth in it, no emoji, no explanation. Suddenly the mind creates a story. They are upset with me. They are dismissing me. They do not respect me. The emotional reaction comes not from the event itself, but from the interpretation wrapped around it. The Stoics understood this deeply. Events are often neutral long before our judgments color them. We suffer not only from what happened, but from the meanings we rush to assign. A delayed response becomes rejection. A tired tone becomes contempt. A disagreement becomes betrayal. How much of human conflict begins there, in the gap between what is real and what is assumed? This is why one of the strongest habits you can build is the habit of separating intent from interpretation. Instead of asking, "Why are they doing this to me?" ask, "What do I actually know?" Not "What do I fear?" Not "What does my ego suggest?" What is true and what am I adding? That question alone can spare you enormous inner turmoil. It can keep you from reacting to fantasies your wounded mind has mistaken for facts. And once you begin seeing clearly, you start noticing another form of control that hides behind virtue: emotional negotiation. This is when guilt is used as currency, when disappointment is staged to bend your choices, when affection becomes conditional, when kindness is expected to mean surrender. Many people are trapped by this because they confuse being good with being endlessly available. They think setting a boundary is cruelty. They think saying no makes them selfish. So they say yes with resentment, yes with exhaustion, yes against their own principles, simply to avoid the feeling of being the bad person in someone else's story.
But reason is not cruelty. Boundaries are not betrayal, and kindness that requires self-abandonment is not kindness at all. The Stoic does not ask, "How do I avoid making people uncomfortable?" The Stoic asks, "What is right?" That is a much harder question because it often demands that you tolerate someone else's disapproval without collapsing into guilt. If your decisions can be steered by emotional pressure, then your character is not yet fully your own. But if you can remain calm while others try to pull you away from your principles, something powerful happens. You become governed by conscience instead of coercion. Of course, this only becomes possible when you stop fearing discomfort so much. For many people, Discomfort is the invisible master behind almost every compromise. Not physical pain necessarily, but social discomfort. Awkward silence, tension in the room, the possibility of being misunderstood, the sting of rejection, the friction of a difficult conversation. These things feel unbearable, so people avoid them. They tell half-truths. They stay in unhealthy dynamics. They delay necessary boundaries. They sacrifice clarity for temporary ease. And this is exactly why they're easy to influence. Because anyone who cannot tolerate discomfort will eventually obey whoever promises relief from it. The Stoics trained themselves to see discomfort differently, not as damage, but as sensation, not as proof that something is wrong, but often as the price of living honestly. A hard conversation is uncomfortable. So is saying no. So is standing apart from a group. So is refusing to explain yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you. But none of this is harm. The real harm is what happens when you betray your own reason to escape a moment of unease. Once you understand this, you stop negotiating your values in exchange for comfort. You let the discomfort come. You feel it. You do not dramatize it. And because you can endure it, one of the manipulator's most reliable tools falls uselessly to the ground. There is also another trap, more subtle than the rest, the tendency to personalize everything. Someone is quiet and you assume it is about you. Someone offers criticism and you experience it as an attack on your identity. Someone fails to respond the way you hoped, and your mind places you at the center of the entire event. Ego does this. It turns ordinary life into a hall of mirrors where every reflection seems to be about the self. But most of what happens around you is not a verdict on you. It is simply life moving through other people's limitations, distractions, fears, habits, and wounds. The Stoic mind learns to step back and see events more objectively. That comment may reflect their frustration, not your worth. That silence may reflect their fatigue, not your rejection. That disagreement may reveal a difference in perspective, not a personal insult. When you stop turning every event into a statement about your value, your emotional life becomes quieter, lighter, more spacious. And again, manipulation weakens because there is less ego for it to hook into. What begins to replace all of this is something far more solid, an inner anchor. Without that anchor, people drift. They change depending on who they are around. They absorb the values of the room. They become one version of themselves in romance, another in friendship, another at work, another online. Their identity becomes negotiable because it is built from reaction instead of principle. But the strongest people are not the loudest or the hardest. They are the most internally consistent. They know what they stand for before pressure arrives. They know what they will not trade, what they will not fake, what they will not betray in themselves just to keep peace on the surface. This is inner sovereignty, not the domination of others, but the governance of the self. Seneca often wrote about the instability of those who are tossed around by fortune, by reputation, by the opinions of the crowd. The lesson is timeless. If you do not choose your principles, the world will choose them for you. And then you will wonder why your life feels so easily shaken. So anchor yourself. Decide what matters. Decide what kind of person you intend to be when praise comes, and when criticism comes, and when loneliness comes, and when temptation comes. Do this before the moment tests you. Because in the moment, you do not rise to your ideals, you fall to your training. And this is the quiet power of the unshakable mind. It is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It does not need to win every argument, or expose every manipulator, or prove its strength through force. In many cases, it simply refuses to be moved. It listens without absorbing poison. It sees pressure without submitting to it. It feels emotion without becoming emotion. It remains kind but not compliant, open but not porous, calm but not weak. This is what people misunderstand about Stoic strength. They imagine a cold person who feels nothing, but true Stoic strength is warmer than that and deeper than that. It is the stability that allows you to act well even when others act poorly. It is the self-command that prevents another person's chaos from becoming your character. It is the freedom of no longer being ruled by every trigger that touches your nervous system. And like all real strength, it is built quietly, through pauses, through reflection, through the repeated choice to return your attention to what is yours and release what never was. No one masters this in a day. You will still feel the pull of approval, the rush of anger, the ache of guilt, the urge to explain, the instinct to personalize. But each time you notice it without surrendering to it, you become a little less governable by the outside world. That is the path forward, not controlling other people, not becoming emotionally untouchable, but mastering the one place where freedom has always been possible, your own inner state. Because in the end, that is what the Stoics were really teaching, that the strongest life is not the one that conquers others, but the one that cannot be conquered from within. A life guided by reason, a character anchored in principle, a mind that remains its own. So, as you leave this reflection, ask yourself honestly, where are you still reactive? Whose approval still alters your peace? What discomfort still has the power to control your choices? Start there. Practice there. That is where the philosophy becomes real. And if this spoke to something deeper in you, let that be the beginning, not the end. Share your thoughts in the comments, pass this video to someone who needs it, and subscribe if you want to keep walking this Stoic path together.